In this video lecture, we'll look at an important class of techniques in data science and specifically in Bayesian machine learning known as mixture models. Mixture models provide a great framework for a whole class of machine learning problems known as unsupervised learning, which you've heard about in other courses. And they have tremendous applicability to the general area of clustering, specifically finding groups without knowing the response variable, the value of a response variable, but just knowing the values of predictor variables and grouping those predictor variables into specific groups that might represent underlying structure in the problem. And the way that we solve this problem using these mixture models is using an algorithm known as expectation maximization. The expectation maximization algorithm is a very important technique for data scientists, and we'll talk about the specifics of it next time, but we'll introduce the general concept in this lecture. So to see how these mixture models work, essentially they're a way of combining likelihoods or density functions or even probability mass functions for models. So for example, if we have let's consider this to be a density function for x given some parameters theta, then what we're doing is we're saying it's actually a composition of densities of the same notion, x given theta, but now we have theta k, where each one of those is indexed by the group that you're in. So specifically, the data come in these variables in our data matrix X, and we consider them to be visible or observable, things that we can actually see. And this is the data that we collect for our problem. The theta, as we know from what we've seen over and over again, this represents the vector parameters in these distributions. And typically it's not visible. We don't know what these parameters are, but we've learned how to estimate those parameters or these parameters with Bayes' rule. The complication now is that they're coming from a variety of different clusters or groups, and that's what's complicating things. And the K, of course, is an index of these components or groups that shows which group the observation might be a member of, which one of these different groups it might be a member of. And we're going to weight these by a probability of being in K, which is given by pk. And of course, it's a probability, so they have to sum to 1. And we note that they're also latent. We don't know what these are. We're not given these components directly, so we have to estimate them as well. So mixture models then have this natural interpretation, as we said, for unsupervised learning, where we could think of each one of these Ks as a cluster or a model that an observation in X might come from. And the way we're going to do it is we're going to represent that as a soft membership. So it's going to be soft in the sense there's going to be a probability of being in that model, which is defined by pk, as opposed to the way a lot of clustering is done, which is with a hard membership. You're either in a cluster or you're not in it. In the case of these density or these mixture model ways of doing density analysis, we are going to treat it as a soft membership, pk. So let's look at a simple example of this, and we'll start with the idea of a univariate Gaussian mixture. So let's suppose then that we've got a population that consists of observations, and they come from two Gaussians, and these are univariate Gaussians. So their index is 1 or 2, and we have a mean and a variance associated with each of those two Gaussians. And of course, they're just given by these density formulas that we saw early on in the course for univariate Gaussians. We're going to let pi be the probability that an observation comes from a distribution, and pi1 then is the probability that a particular observation comes from distribution 1, the first one of these two Gaussians. And clearly, pi2 must be 1 minus pi1. So we only have one probability that we need to be concerned with for this problem. So the mixture density then is just mixing these two. So pi1 times the likelihood of being in density 1, and 1 minus pi 1 times the likelihood of being in density 2. And here are the parameters. Again, we have the 1 probability, pi 1, and then we have the parameters for each of the two Gaussians, the mu's and the sigmas. Now, the log likelihood, this is sort of the important thing to notice. The log likelihood now is a sum of logs, which makes it very, very difficult for us to find an answer to, in particular to estimate with. It's that summation of the log, where the log is inside the sum. And you can see that all we've done here is exactly what we've done in the past. We're just taking a log likelihood, but now it's going to be more difficult for us to maximize. So that's the problem. We can't easily maximize this likelihood function anymore, and that's the problem. So how do we approach it? We iteratively maximize it. So here's just a brief overview to what we'll talk about next time, which is the EM algorithm. The way we do it is we start with guessed values for the parameters, and we calculate the probability of membership in each one of the Gaussians as guessed values, or as values that we derive from our guessed values for the parameters. So we start with guessed values for the parameters, and from that we calculate the likelihood of being in either, in this case, one of the two Gaussians. And then we calculate new estimates for the parameters based upon that, and we repeat until change is small, until we see no change, or until the likelihood seems to have plateaued. Okay, so let's look at a simple example. This is the univariate example. So we've got two potential Gaussian distributions represented by these histograms along the axis here, the abscissa. And here are the results that you could see that we would get from applying this Gaussian mixture model for this particular problem. If you notice along the abscissa, the little tick marks are showing where the observations are. The red line is obviously showing the density estimate for this particular set of data. And what we see in the green is the membership. These are the estimates for the probabilities of being a member of either the first density on the left or the second density on the right. And we've plotted it in terms of pi 1, which is the probability of being in the density on the left. And you can see that the points, the farther they are to the left, the higher the probability that they're members of that first density on the left. And as we go to the right, the probability of being in the first density drops. And in fact, it goes pretty close to 0 eventually. Not quite 0, but close to 0. So you see that this is giving you the idea behind this mixture modeling. We've got, in this case, two potential Gaussians. We've got the data, and we're estimating membership of the data in the two Gaussians that we have estimated for this particular problem. And of course, we've estimated their mean and their standard deviation as well. All right, so in the next video, we'll talk about the specifics of the EM algorithm, and we'll generalize to a multivariate case.